Library, the Carpentry at University of Oslo effort. We really are enjoying welcoming you to the mini-seminar of the Research Bazaar. Last year we had the Carpentry Week. This year we joined the Research Bazaar, the ResBaz initiative, as the only European venue. I am so proud of my team's contribution, even with the small technical difficulties, and the other University of Oslo staff included in the Carpentry at University of Oslo effort. And I emphasize effort because we have people here with Lex and Elin and all the others that really go that extra mile to teach the other ones skills and enlighten us about and give us insights on their spare time with extra effort. So thank you to you. And these days we have actually 12 workshops going, 2 seminars and a poster session. So I think that calls for an applause for the people that made this possible. So what's with the library and the carpentry and the research data? After the total makeover that we've seen of the scholarly communication, it is extremely interesting, I find. What structures and what sources provide the input to research, and where do people choose to store and share results? There are numbers of opportunities and pitfalls for the individual, of course, but also implications on the institutional, national, and the global scale. Today, we will meet people, some of the people working very hard to improve, secure, clarify the situation. And I'm really delighted to have such wonderful people with Mark as our first speaker. Welcome, a big welcome to Mark Hahnel. Applause. Yeah, come. You are a biologist. And I read that ultimately your frustration being a researcher drove you to innovation and into business.
True.
Yeah, so we really would like to hear more about that.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a bit strange. Thank you for having me. I'm Mark. I'm going to be talking a little bit about, following on what was said about research data and how it's changing, and how the research space is changing, and what software is doing, and everything like this. So before I get into it, I'll only talk about 20 minutes or so, because I know we're running a bit behind. Just so I know the audience, who here is in the library? Quite a few from the library. Who here is a researcher? So quite a few researchers. Who here works with data? Okay, pretty much everyone. And data is a pretty broad definition, right? Because data could mean anything from videos to data sets to software. So when I say data from now on, that's kind of what I'm referring to. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about why this is changing, why this is important, where we come into it, and try and give you some examples of really interesting ways and the importance of the library in bridging this gap as everything changes in academia. A lot of this you may already know, so apologies in advance if I'm saying stuff you already know. But I'm just going to tell a little bit of the story from our side of things, from what's happened with figshare. For those who don't know what figshare is, don't worry, I'll get to that as well. It started 5 years ago, as was said, when I was an academic. I did stem cell biology. And I had a lot of videos of cells moving from one side of the screen to the other. I had a lot of data sets. And one day I realized that of my publications that I was going to get from my PhD, I have 3 publications, it's pretty impressive, none of the interesting stuff from my PhD was ever going to be made available because the publications wouldn't accept the videos. And I didn't want to make those videos available because for the good of mankind, and this is paid for by the public, it should be shared. I wanted to make my videos available because I just spent the whole weekend in a lab working on my video, and nobody's ever going to see this. So I decided to start making them available online. And this was a little bit naive. I thought, there's just a few things I need to do. I need to make everything persistent, so I need to make everything stay around forever. And I need to give everything a persistent identifier, a DOI. So I started doing that and created something called figshare. So figshare is a place where you can upload your files. I started making my files available, then other people started making their files available. So originally you could only upload, I had lots of videos, lots of data sets, and lots of figures that weren't going to fit into other papers. You know, I had 3 figures, and then it wasn't a full paper, so they weren't getting published. And that's where the name comes from, figshare. We were just discussing this out over a coffee. It's a pretty silly name because people think of figures as static images, which is actually what we're trying to get past now. Interactive figures, more and more detailed data behind what's going on. And so people started, when we made the platform available to everybody, people started uploading other stuff that they wanted credit for. I want to go to a postdoc interview and say, I've got my 3 papers, they've got their 3 papers, my competition, but I have more citations because I made my videos available and people cited them. That was the goal behind it. And then people started uploading other stuff. This is, you know, data sets, posters. And one of the things we were keen on was just using basic web standards. So if it's a video, it plays in the browser. Academia was the last place that got playing videos. You can still go to some really big journals, and you go to the supporting information section, and it asks you to download a video. It's the only space in the world on the internet that asks you to download videos. So there's a bit of catching up to do. So why should I care? It's good to know that we've got some researchers, we've got some library staff. Why should you care about data? Science works, academia works, you know, we get cures for things. The whole idea is it could just happen a lot more efficiently. So the big thing that changed was the government started saying, and the public funding of research, they started saying, we pay for your research. I don't want to see 6-page, you know, we give you £1 billion. I don't want 20,000 6-page documents. I want to see everything you created, the code, the hardware, everything. I want to see everything that you're creating. And so about 5 years ago, Figshare got some investment from a company called Digital Science, which has sister companies like Altmetric and ReadCube and things. And that was because they're business savvy, and they knew that the funders were going to have big plans for making data available. And so we went along, and if you look at these, this is in the last few years, what's come along. Since 2013 in America, America's an interesting place right now. We don't know what's going to happen to a lot of these things. They have said that Francis Collins is staying on as the head of the NIH, so the left-hand side will probably say the same. Australia has a lot of, it's led the way in research data infrastructure, and then in Scandinavia and in Europe, the big one recently has been Horizon 2020, the European Commission. And I just dug a little deeper there. So they're saying that we're based in London, and I actually had a guy come over from the European Commission to talk to us, and I got quite embarrassed because on the 27th of May, he said, the European Commission said, everything will need to be, all the data that we fund will need to be available in 2020. So as of 2020, if you get a European Commission grant, you need to make all the data available at some point. And this is where I'm saying the library comes in, because the biggest gap here, and the greatest thing about this event, and software carpentry and data carpentry and things like this, is the biggest gap is the education. A lot of the academics have no idea this is coming. I didn't have any idea this was coming. I just happened to be egotistical with my data, and it was the right time. But what was interesting about this was the 27th of May. And this is the 25th of July. And he came over to visit us in our office on the 29th of July. And I said, wow, 2020, do you really think you can get all of the European countries to be making all of their data available by 2020? And he said, did you not see the latest statement? We're changing it to 2017. So 2017. So instead of doing it in 2020, they changed it to 2017. This is in July last year, so I'm questioning him saying, in 3.5 years, you're going to have enough time to get everybody to change the whole way that European research is done? And they said, we changed it to 2017. And as I say, it was quite embarrassing because this is supposed to be my job. I'm supposed to be looking out for things like this. And I actually did a little bit of digging with regards to University of Oslo here. This is one of our sister companies that just aggregates funding information. So a lot of you may not know this. I didn't know this today. The two biggest funders of research at the University of Oslo, number 2 is the European Commission. So it's going to affect a lot of research here. And number 1 is the Research Council of Norway. So let's have a look at what their thoughts are at the moment. Yes, question?
Just wondering, how are they going to deal with confidential data? Suppose they get a grant from the European Commission and they're working with data from SSK, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, so the question there was, how are we supposed to deal with confidential data? As I say, figshare itself, we've got ways in which you can release metadata about confidential files. You can release metadata records only. So it says, I've done the work. You can cite my metadata record, but I can never make these files available for reason X, Y, Z. The other thing there is most of the rules are as open as possible, as closed as necessary. So I used to do genetics. If you have genetics data, can you make it available if it's got human identifiable stuff? Probably not. And that is an interesting idea because that means that a lot of people have a get-out clause. I don't want to do this. I'm busy. I'm a researcher. I don't want to do this. You're making me do this? I'll say I've got some commercial funding and I can't do it. And I don't have to do that. That's okay, because there's still an absolute ton of data and code and stuff. You know, even if you get 10% of the stuff that's not being made available, academia is one of the biggest generators of data, of research information. So even if you get 2%, it still changes the way that academia works. But there are things in place to keep that under wraps. We can talk more about that later. Just to push on, sorry, the Research Council of Norway is officially at the recommendation phase. It's not a mandate, it's a recommendation. And this is where we find ourselves kind of globally. This is what I call the Opal academic tidal wave. It's in 2s. 1 and 2 is open access, recommend open access to papers, recommend open access to data. 3 and 4 is mandated open access to papers, mandated open access to data. And 5 and 6 is enforced mandated. Because even at the point when you say, okay, you have to make your data available, who's checking that? Are there a Research Council of Norway going to hire 50 people to come around and make sure that so it's a hard space. So at the moment, we're kind of at number 4. And this is kind of where Norway is with these recommendations, and the European Commission is getting towards number 5. But if you ask any funder, do we have any funders in? If you ask any funder, please go out and ask them when you see them, when they think we're going to get to point number 6, enforce mandated open access to all of the digital outputs of research. Every single person I've spoke to said by 2020 we will get to that, at that level. That's from the NIH in the US, the biggest funder in the world, to smaller councils in other countries. So if you're a researcher, it's all a bit, as I said, you've already got too much going on. You can't even read all the papers there are, so now you're saying I have to do all of this other stuff I haven't been trained to do. So what's the benefits for the researchers? And this is kind of where a lot of this mentality is coming from. Everything used to be about the publication. When I was doing my PhD, I was told if I get published twice in Nature, I'm set for life. That was just the way it worked. So everything is about the publication. Publish or perish. But you've got all these other things, methods, chemical entity names, all this other information that if academia was invented today, it wouldn't work like this. It would work something more like this. You would just have lots of linked information on the internet, and you could basically pull on anything and say, okay, so this software, what's it linked to? Tell me who funded it. Tell me how many times it's been used. Who were the authors, etc., etc. So this is what we're trying to move to. And again, it's not about academia doesn't work. We still get drug discoveries. It's about how do we get there faster? How do we make things more efficient? And so, as I mentioned with figshare, this is just getting into some of the anecdotal side of things. One of the things we did was we made, we said, this is how the internet works. If it's online, I don't expect to download things and then check I have the codecs to open something up. So one of the things we just did at the beginning was just, if there is a file viewer for it, we will use the file viewer inline in the browser. And what we didn't realize at the time was this was very interesting to another stakeholder in academia. So we've mentioned the funders, we've mentioned the universities, we've mentioned the academics. Is there a big player here we're not mentioning? Anyone guess? Publishers. So the publishers knew this was coming too. They knew the funder mandates were coming too. Any publishers in? Okay, good. It is being filmed. So publishers said, hey, if you're going to have to make all of your data available, you already trust us with the papers. You've got the paper. Give us $1,000 for an article processing charge, an open access fee. And give us another $500 and we'll take care of all of your data for you and tick all those funder boxes for you. So the publishers see a big role in being the custodians of all of these other research outputs. And the reason why these ones are up here, Nature, PLOS, Wiley, ACS, American Chemical Society, is because they're all the ones that use figshare for their data infrastructure. Because everything's changing so fast, they said, can we use, so if you've published in these journals and you've uploaded cool videos or supporting information, it's probably already on figshare. Because the rules change so fast. That European Commission data funding, the European Commission Horizon 2020 funding, as of January the 1st, you had to make your data available in a repository that pushed all of the metadata to open air. So if every one of these publishers had built their own system, then they'd have to scramble in the second half of last year to build all these new bits of functionality. So instead, they just use figshare and demand that we make that available, and then it works for everybody. So publishers are interested. I just wanted to make you aware of that. There's this sentiment from Chris Borg at MIT on the future of libraries. Academia is in general best served when the libraries are the trusted long-term repository for the scholarly record. I don't think I'll get many arguments about that. Happy to discuss in more detail after. So we started working with universities. So we provide the interface for universities and say, if you want all of this information, if you want to know all of the statistics on a university level, we can do that for you. If you want to grab the content that already lives on the publishers and pull it into your university data repository, we can do that for you. We realized that in terms of what's in it for me, this is when it started to get interesting. So we started doing custom portals. So this is the music archive at Monash University who we work with. So this is really interesting because this is data, but this is, A, the music archive would say we have no data. B, they said we don't need a general data repository because we don't want it getting mixed up with all the physics stuff. We need our own data repository. And this is just a filter. Everything lives somewhere. We use Australian University National Storage, and we're just the interface. So we're just a pretty interface that groups it together in a way that says this looks like its own data repository. It's just a filter on the Monash one. I'll try and wrap up quickly. We have, just on a personal level, why is this important? So we started working with the University of Sheffield. And this guy, for the academics here, what's in it for me? Why should I bother? It's more work for me. This guy, a guy called Alistair Ray, he was publishing a paper, and the library said to him when he was getting his article processing charge or something, do you have any data? You can put it on our new data repository. And he was like, well, I got some cool files. They're all, it's basically, this work is saying, if you look at America, it's not, and where people commute from, it's actually not cities. It's this weird, it creates this new map of cities where people will commute from, which was really cool, but people wanted to play with the data, dig a little bit deeper. So we put it on figshare, and it was kind of cool, but it kind of set unrealistic expectations because they got this at the end of last year. He put this on in December. He was one of the first people to use it, and he got an absolute ton of attention. So you can see this was screen grabbed ages ago. He got 37,000 views in day one. He got 4,000 downloads. And this thing right here is an altmetric score, which says, it tells you, because it's citable with a DOI, it tells you where this is being picked up by the news, or by Twitter, or by anything. So he looked, and he was quite happy about this, because one of those news sites was Wired magazine. So he wasn't going to make his data available. He made his data available. It got picked up in Wired magazine. Does that matter to him? Does he care about these things? If you look at his figshare profile the next day, his whole bio now is, his work has appeared in a variety of media outlets, including The Economist, Huffington Post, City Metric, Wired, The Guardian. That all happened the day before. So that ability of, if you're competing in academia against everybody else, you know, it's you versus everybody else to get that PI job. You have to separate yourself in some way. So if he made his data, look, he's literally got one object. If he made his stuff available, he then got all of this attention. He went on to do a Reddit AMA I saw the other day. So he's loving it, you know. And so it's all about, how can I prove that I've got extra value here? One of the things I found really interesting, see if you can spot the difference here. This is just a recent thing, as I say, wrapping up in 2 minutes. If you look at the top here, this is Lex, who's in the audience, specially chosen. Dudes, does anyone spot the difference between, see his metrics top right and Lex's metrics top right? This is something that went live yesterday. And 5 years ago, when we started Figshare, we said citations coming soon. And we've finally been able to add citation counts. And citation counts are really interesting because now you can say, look at all of the extra citations I'm getting because of this other work that I'm putting on. So we can see that already. The reason why that's important is we did a survey. 80% of the people we surveyed said they count a data citation as much or more than a paper citation. So this is where you need to plug into the researcher's way of thinking. And you can see this is the actual one itself. It's been blogged about, it's got a lot of attention, and it's got the citations now, so that's nice to see. So if we're moving to this new universe, last point is, what is the point? Who cares? You're making us do all these things. The academics can do well, the universities can do well, because you know as sure as hell that if they can measure you on it and they're making you do it, the funders are going to start measuring you on things like data citations, and Thomson Reuters have interesting things. There's prizes going on a large scale. This is Open Science Prize, and this is New England Journal of Medicine have recently said, reuse data as well as you can, and we will give you cash money for it. So they're trying to find ways to incentivize it. And what we're going to do is just make sure that if you do make your data available using Figshare, or if you're going to make your data available anywhere, make sure it does these things. Make sure it is fair, as the definition, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable for humans and machines. And what that means is it needs a persistent identifier. This is just explaining that if you don't have a persistent identifier, a DOI, that the links break. I haven't got time to go into this slide, but if you look, the links broken are from places like Harvard and NASA. Everyone's like, oh, I trust you need to have those digital object identifiers so that you can integrate with lots of other systems. So there's other ways for people to find your research. Open APIs are essential. And then this is my last slide, because what the real point is, this is a slide I used to explain to my mom why linked open data is important. And this is the idea here that this is from the Cordoma Foundation. It's looking for a cure. So this is the point at which they find the cure. These are 3 labs working on the same bit of work. And that lab group there builds on top of this lab's work, and et cetera, et cetera. And eventually lab 2 finds a cure, and they win the Nobel Prize. Great news. So lab 3 and lab 1 are going to be annoyed about that, right? They want the Nobel Prize. So why would they just give them their data? In fact, all it takes to cut that off, when lab 2 says to lab 3, hey, can I have your data? They don't even have to reply to the email. It's not even like you have to actively do something to stop progress. You can just passively let things stop. And when you break one of these, this goes this way, and people die. So that's a very extreme version of it, but it's a very good way of explaining to my mom why this is important. Whereas if that data is just forced to be available online, then you don't even have to ask them. You can just go get the data and build on top of it. So hopefully It was a bit fast, but hopefully that gave you some ideas about the incentives for researchers, the incentives for librarians, the incentive for institutions, and the other people who are involved in this space. Thank you.
So, being the only venue in the north, I fear the other venues won't need this, but this is University.
Thank you very much.
Umbrella for you, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I need some ice shoes.
Yeah.